welcome to a new edition of Human Conversations. I am really thrilled to be here with you today. I'm Jessica Lockhart, the director of the International Institute of Humanology with double seats in Switzerland and Panama. It's a great pleasure to be here today to speak about a topic that I think is very, very hot today. I think you're going to be really interested in what our four panelists have to share, because this will affect everyone in the world. Today, we're going to have four fantastic people joining us from different places in the world, as usual, and from very different backgrounds. We're going to be talking about the challenges that our young people are facing today. Isn't that something interesting? Before we open the discussion and start talking about this, let me just give you some highlights on the latest news on what's going on in the world of humanology. I am extremely happy to say it's been a busy day. A few minutes ago, one of our books, The Optimism You, was featured in the International the International Book Fair in the city of New York. Da-da-da! So it was a great moment. It was fantastic to be there. And I'm also very, very happy and proud to announce that Humanology is reaching the university. Our discipline, Humanology, is already going to be taught as a master's degree by the World Humanistic University. And each of its components, like Optimism coaching, will also be a graduate degree. We're so excited. We're so happy. Humanology is gaining more and more recognition all around the world because it's the only discipline that approaches human beings in such an integral way. So we wanted to share this piece of news with you. And last but not least, our new digital platform is already live, and we invite you all to join us, to check it out, to visit it. You know the address? IIH.world. Yes, like International Institute of Humanology, IIH.world. And that's the news. Now we're going to start with our human conversations. As I said, we're going to have four fantastic contributors and panelists joining us today. Let me very briefly introduce them all to you. I am really happy and honored to have, first of all, Dr. Saskia Harkema, all the way from Holland. Saskia is somebody I've been collaborating with these last months, and a very, very, very interesting, not only professional, but also human being. She is a doctor in sociology and economy, if I'm not mistaken, and is the director of a foundation in Holland called Faces of Change. She is an expert in working with young refugees and has endeavored long and wide to help human beings thrive better in life. Hello, Saskia. Very happy to have you here today.
Hello, Jessica. Nice to see you and nice to be here.
And now let's move on down. We also have Alex. Alex Tan is joining us all the way from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I'm so very happy to see you here today. We met there a few years ago when I went to offer one of my talks at one of the ICC international congresses. And we understood what each other was saying very clearly. We liked each other's message. Let me very briefly tell you a little bit about Alex. Alex Tan is an expert in leadership, mindset, thought, and an executive coach who founded Athlete's Mind and the Transcendent Mind. And not only that, he always says he's a proud brain tumor survivor. Alex, so happy, so thrilled to have you here. Welcome. And now okay, yes, Alex, please go ahead.
No, thank you. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here.
Thank you, Alex. Now we're going to be introducing Richard, let's see if I can pronounce his last name properly, Hengelbrok, who's joining us from Panama, although he is not Panamanian, as I think you will see in a few minutes. He is or has been a teacher for over 38 years, always working with young people. So I think he has a lot to say about the topic that we're going to be discussing today. He has also worked in private and public institutions as a teacher, administrator, all around the world, basically. He worked in many, many schools in 7 different countries in America and Europe. Richard was just teaching a class before he joined us here today, and is a person who has a lot to say, as you will see. Richard, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Jessica, thank you. Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
And last but not least, you know, we always introduce the last speaker because they're usually a member of the Institute. We also have James S.O.U.L with us, as you already might know because you have been following Human Conversations for a while now. James S.O.U.L is the creative director in the Institute. He's an artist himself, and he is also, I think, the youngest member in the panel. We thought we needed somebody young to represent the young with their own voice, and that's why we chose him out of all the people in the Institute to join us today. Hi, James. So happy to have you here. Oh, by the way, he's also an optimism coach. Let's not forget that. Hi, James. How are you?
Hi, Jessica. Thank you for having me. Like always, it's a pleasure. And thank you to all the other panelists for participating in this roundtable discussion with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So for those of us who are watching, let me very quickly remind you that we're going to have the questions that the Institute prepared for the panelists, but then we might have some time for your questions. Please use Messenger, use the chat box to write your questions and send them to us so we can ask our panelists your questions and share any comments you may have. And if you're watching this later, if you can't catch it live, do leave the questions and comments as well. We'll get back to you. So without further ado, we're going to start with Human Conversations again. I'm going to ask you the first question. The first question says, what is, in your opinion, the biggest challenge young people face today? You know, they face a lot of challenges, I know, but which one would you say is the biggest? Alex, would you like to go first?
Hi, Jessica. Yeah, why not? I have a very interesting view. I think one of the biggest challenge is managing and digesting information, because never have we been so connected with so many things, devices. The world is now literally borderless. I mean, look at us tonight, right? We are from really every part of the world if you stretch it, and everything is easily accessible at the palm of our hands, and it's 24 hours. And if anybody is measuring the data bytes that is transferring at any point of time, right, it must be in trillions or, you know, more than that. And in the past, it was much easier. Whenever we face anything, we have a few opinions who will direct us and tell us, and then we digest, right? But now we have so many opinions, right? Like this pandemic, this lockdown. Some people will say it's essential to wear the mask. Some people say, you know, it's my liberty and my right not to wear the mask. It's you can go out and it's safe. You know, my immune system doesn't hurt the young people. So how do you make decision when you have so many different perspectives? It used to be much easier. And of course, I think there is a lot more bombardment of things happening. Because we are borderless and because we are so exposed to so many things, at any one time, there's so many things to process. So I think that's one of the things that people are facing. And because of that, people are having burnout. And yeah, that's what I think.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much for that very interesting comment. I guess the side response, or one of the possible responses to that, and one of the possible reactions by young people then, is to be a bit more flexible. But let's see what the other speakers, what the other panelists have to say about this. Saskia, would you like to go next, please? What do you think is the biggest challenge? Microphone, please.
Yes, I had to think about that question because in a sense, I would like to point out youth is not one group. You know, we have youth with different cultural backgrounds, with also different socio-economic status. And yeah, of course, there is globalization, which somehow has brought youth under one common umbrella. So that's definitely the fact. But there are still many differences among youth. And I notice that because I teach youth from all over the world. But I think it's very true what you say, Alex, that it's especially social media, which somehow has created a space, I would say, which has connected youth and across borders. So it has, created this space where they can chat, where they can connect, where they can be with each other. But it also has a downside, somehow, I feel, because everything comes through them through this smartphone. So also they inform themselves through this smartphone. And I recently heard that young people don't read anymore. So they don't see the necessity to read because everything comes through them via YouTube and the short messages that they get through the smartphone. So that's one. So somehow the world, and I can imagine that if the world comes to you through your smartphone, this also colors your perception of what the world is. But it has another also effect. It's that, and this is happening in some parts in countries in Asia, that what happens is that youth, when they're having problems, for instance, you know, they feel insecure, or they create alter egos. They create a personage in this virtual world, because it's a virtual world, and then you can be anyone who you want to be. And they live out everything that they are not able to realize in the real world. They live it out in this personage that they have created in the virtual world. So somehow I feel that these social media raises also questions about identity, very fundamental questions about identity. Because why would you want to create this personage? So I think that's a very big challenge, to somehow filter and stay centered and not be misled, but everything that's bombarding you and can also make you insecure in a sense. Because you see these influencers, they are often young people, and you may come to feel, oh, I want to be like them, or I have to be like them. So it's I think it's very complex, everything that's happening.
Thank you so much, Saskia. Yeah, that's a very interesting point as well, because creating those personas to somehow represent somebody they're not, but they wish to be, is something that people used to do in the past too, but the role models were much more limited. There were that many role models, and they were not as immediate. So I think that this has really affected our young people, not so young maybe too.
Yeah.
Richard, what's your take on this?
Oh, thanks, Jessica. What you said ties in exactly to what I was thinking about. And I've taught students, middle school and high school, some college level, for 4 decades. And I think, what's the difference, right? And about just within 20 years ago, before everyone had a cell phone, the kids' main influence were family, friends, teachers and classmates, and then the entertainers, on their TV shows or movies. But today, I feel the main influencer are these people on the YouTube channels, literally called influencers. And so the kids have, as you were saying, the others were saying, all these people telling them how to live and what's cool and what they should be. And it's an overload of information and challenges to what does it mean to be a good person. And then the kids, they're talking to each other now by texting instead of conversation. So how do you talk to each other? And I think it's really important to understand the challenge kids have to figure out, what is my value here? So they don't create these alter egos and they don't get the wrong influences. And there's so many examples, and just one little one is kids have their own mailbox today, and they get to read their own mail. And imagine if, when we were younger, we asked our parents to put up our own mailbox outside our house, and the parents weren't allowed to get into it and know who was putting mail in there. I mean, just that example, and as parents, we have to deal with this whole new world and figure out, well, how much say should I have in what my kids do? You know? And I think that's the challenge for the kids to find out, like, what's normal, what's healthy, and you know, who do they listen to? So luckily, there's a lot of hope, and I see a lot of that good stuff happening. But and just one last thing, many kids in the world, their biggest challenge is getting clean water. You know, billions of kids wake up every morning and they don't have clean water, and here in Panama as well. So for many of them, that's the main challenge. But for those in the digital world, like, we are privileged to be, you know, having more access to technology. I'm not sure it's such a privilege sometimes. I think that's sometimes even more of a difficulty. So
thank you for that, Richard. Thank you so much. Yeah, you know, one of the things I usually say is that the internet somehow shrunk the world into a smaller place. And a lot of people who had no clue what was happening at the other end of the world now start seeing everything. Those children who have no access to water see how other children are living with all these wonderful, fantastic things. And the world seems to be a less fair place just because people can compare much more easily. Before it was the movies, but the movies were like fantasy. But this is not fantasy. This is the world. Thank you so much. James, what would you say is the biggest challenge?
First of all, I would like to say that I found the perspectives of the other panelists very interesting. However, I have to say that I don't agree with any of them. To be honest, in any case, water is an issue, but not just for the youth. It's for everybody, I would say. So I wouldn't just classify it as for the youth. However, you mentioned social media. Yes, it can pose some problems for certain youth. But I would say that social media and the internet and having access to all of this information is actually something positive rather than negative. Because you say that we create personas. Personas have existed as far as time goes. That has always been like that. Actors are personas. Politicians are personas. People that do certain things are personas. You put out a show because you want other people to like what you're doing. You know, we see singers and things like that. They get back to their houses and they might not be exactly what they're portraying. But we idolize those people. You guys idolize somebody at some point as well. You idolize that persona. You want it to be like that person. And thanks to all of the social media, we are able to explore our identities more than ever. We're able to have a better understanding of what it means to be an individual and be able to have that experience of finding ourselves in more of a safe environment. Before, you mentioned mailboxes. There's a certain privacy to that, of course, but everyone's entitled to their privacy. And imagine you are a kid trying to figure out your own persona, who you are. Maybe having that separate mailbox is exactly what you need in order to be able to figure that out. Because 20 years ago, there were a lot of things that were taboo and that you could not talk about with your parents, your siblings, your teachers, your influences, like you mentioned. But now you don't have to. You can find that information and you don't have to go to the library, which was also embarrassing back in the day, trying to check out a book about something very personal. Now you no longer have to do that. You have that anonymity. So you are able to feel confident with that self-exploration, which I think is key to that freedom that youth strives for so much nowadays. So I would say that the main problem in reality is actually the current global situation with how things are. The global warming that we have, the fact that if we don't take immediate action right now, there's not going to be any youth in the next 50 years because there's not going to be a world for us to strive in. The fact that access to education in some places, yes, it's become easier to get. You know, you have Erasmus, you have free universities in a few places, but like you said, those are for people, for example, who have the digital world, who have access to it, but not everybody has access to it. There's a lot of youth that cannot afford to have an education. Look at students in the States, for example, which is considered a first world country. They have huge amounts of debt. Back in the 80s, when the internet was just starting, when all of this was just starting, a person, while university was expensive, if you had a job, or if you had 2 jobs, you could eventually pay off the debt. Nowadays, that's practically impossible, and we are indebted for the rest of our lives, having to figure things out. Now more than ever, there's flat sharing because students, youth, cannot afford to live on their own because the prices, the inflation has gone up so much that nobody can afford anything. You know, I would say as well that the issues, nutrition, we share, for example, we have all of this exposure, like you mentioned, and there's so many brands that are bad for us. They contaminate our food, they put pesticides on things like that. And we have little say on this because the older generations tend to not take us as seriously, or they think that we don't know as much because they've experienced it, they've lived it longer. And it's hard to be able to change such firm beliefs. And we're constantly rolling a ball up a hill, trying to create this effective change. So I would say that those are the actual factors that are difficult for the youth right now, not social media, because social media connects. Social media helps us see what the world is around us. It's created activists, it's created new organizations, created movements. It's helped achieve and gain new rights. It's helped figure out when people are safe, like when there's an earthquake and people posted on Facebook that they're safe, that they're in a good place. That's thanks to social media. So I understand your point, but I would say that I don't agree. I would say that those are the main issues for youth just now. Thank you.
Thank you, James. See, it was good to have somebody young in the panel because it gives us a completely different perspective, which is the goal of these panels. Human conversations, precisely about that, having a conversation with many different points of view so we can try and learn from one another and build a better understanding or deeper understanding of the topic. Let me now move on to the second question. We're already having quite a few people watching us. So I once again invite everybody to write their questions on the chat and on Messenger if they want to ask any of the questions. So we will ask them at the end. In the meantime, second question. Dun, dun, dun. What advantage would you say youth have today that previous generations didn't have? And why aren't young people making a better use of it? So what is one advantage that young people have today? And how could they use it better? Let's see. Richard, would you go first?
Oh, yeah, perfect. Because it ties right into what was just said by James, that a lot of what he said is the answer to my question. What advantage do they have? And I totally agree. And I have 4 kids of my own, ages 17 to 27, and they are so connected and so involved, and they feel so empowered by the ability to connect around the world instantly, and they get other information. So that's the advantage to what's happening now with the digital world, in my opinion. Kids who were isolated now can find groups that they feel comfortable with and have chat groups, so they're not feeling so isolated. And those are all positives. I mean, I think that's the great thing about the internet. Even something like, I'll use an example again, back in the 80s, when MTV came out, and a lot of parents are like, whoa, wow, it's awful. I was just in college then. But it showed how people can get along. It broke down barriers. And I think I see that a lot in my students or in international schools. They're breaking down barriers. That's wonderful. I think, why it's maybe not used to its maximum is it's so much information. Kids aren't sure which one maybe to use, which is correct. But that's all fixable by teaching. And I think the idea of kids can make their own business now. You have entrepreneurs at 16, 17 making millions. I think entrepreneurship has to be taught. The skills of entrepreneurship should be taught in middle school and high school, which is what I'm doing in my schools, and really helps them with so many things, communication and skills for life. Many of the jobs they'll have when they graduate, in 10 years don't even exist today. So we also have to think about that, right? How are we preparing our kids for the world that they actually are in and will inherit, and hopefully will fix up, will improve. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Richard, for that answer. Yeah, I guess it's a challenge, not just for them, but also for us. Alex, would you like to go next?
I think their biggest advantage today is actually freedom of expression. I come from Asia, and I totally disagree from the perspective of James, where they are not heard. Now, if 20 years ago, right, in my 20s, right, the senior couldn't care less about what you think, right? We come from a very disciplined community. What our parents say, we do, even to the extent what we study, right? You go to a university, you get a doctorate degree, and back then it was either being a lawyer for a Chinese side, a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. That was it, or maybe an accountant if you're good with numbers. And you really, you heard a lot of the stories. You don't really have a lot of self-expression. I mean, today you have Greta Thunberg, right, speaking at World Economic Forum. Give me a few names that you can name. I don't think there's any 17-year-old that a bunch of adults will listen. Today, the youth are being listened to. In the past, our parents in Asia will raise their hand to discipline us. Today, you try that, and the social security person will be knocking on your door. You're not allowed to raise a hand. We were disciplined based on how they thought it was correct. Now, I think the youth are being more respected than before, right? Where how they feel, how they express themselves, even like you said it's your right to have your privacy. There was no such thing 20 years ago for me. My parents say, you don't get rights yet. I'm sorry. As long as you stay in this house, you don't get no rights. Your right is to follow what I think is right for you. Whereas today, I have a 9-year-old daughter, right? And I constantly ask her, right? Did you enjoy school? Did you have fun? Did you learn? Because that was how I'm taught today. Use positive parenting. Right? And that is the right way. So I think that the youth have an advantage where they are being heard more. They're being asked more. They're allowed to express more. And there's more data being collected. Whereas in the past, there was no data being collected. Either you follow or didn't follow. And there was no money to be made back then, to be fair. Now we are monetizing from engagement. We are selling followers. And Richard talked about entrepreneurship, and influencer is a business. It's not about expression. It's a business. If you think about it, is how much you're making from expressing yourself, right? And last time there was maybe the television, the reality TV gets that, and it was entertainment, right? So I think its expression is being heard. And that's a major advantage, at least from my point of view.
Thank you so much, Alex. See, the beauty of having different panelists. I said so. I love it. Saskia, please.
Yes. Well, I disagree with what James said, that because he described, that you were like the stone of Sisyphus. You were trying to pull it upwards, but it keeps falling down, because I think that's one of the big advantages of youth nowadays, which is really different with the prior generation, they are expressing themselves, they are speaking out, and I think this is really good. And what is interesting, it's true and it's not true about social media, because it's definitely a space where they can express themselves, and which is borderless, and which they can connect, but it somehow also has been hijacked, this social media, by companies. And we shouldn't be mistaken, we're products. And they call this surveillance capitalism. So this is, this is the unfortunate, that something which is could be very good is somehow, being also used for other advantages. And well, this is very unfortunate. And what I see happening, interestingly enough, is that it's especially the youth that are very critical about social media. I know many, many young people who have no Facebook accounts anymore. They don't want to be on Instagram. They don't want to be, because they know about this. They know that, that companies are using your data so that they can market their products. They know that. So they're very critical. And this is what I say, the biggest advantage. I really like that. And I see it also in all my work to really support youth in this, because they are the ones that are going on the streets. We had it in Holland, for instance, when you were talking about climate. Holland is, I think, on the happiness index, we are the highest or somewhere there. Can you imagine? We had 35,000 young people going on the streets for the climate, because of the climate change. So I really like that. And what I also really think we should listen more carefully to, and this is also a very big advantage, because they are speaking up. When I ask students and young people, what is important to you? They say to me, you know what? I've seen from my parents, this is my generation, because I also have two children, one of 26 and one 22. We are the generation that we really had to work hard for everything. This is because our parents were from the Second World War, they had to reconstruct the country. So we were fed with, you have to work hard, you have to make a career. And this is how we grew up. And this is what we did. But our children have seen, the effect of that. And it also has a downside. So very often young people say to me, I want to be happy. And I think that's wonderful. They don't say to me, I want to be an engineer, or I want to be a doctor. They often say to me, and it depends, of course, this is why I also emphasize the cultural differences. So in some cultures, parents decide you can be either an engineer or a doctor, that's it. This happens. And then children, they really have to fight for their freedom to be whom they want to be. They want to be a teacher or an artist or whatever. And this happens in many parts of the world. So I think this is what the advantage is. They are much more informed than we are. This is true. They know, and because they are also more computer savvy, so they know exactly where to get information. And I think they are unafraid. They're bold and they're daring. And this is what our world needs. This is really what our world needs. So if you are asking me, how are you going to get out of this situation with this pandemic? I'm putting all my money on youth.
Thank you, Saskia. Thank you for that answer. James, I think you have a few things to say. What would you say is your answer to the question, and any other comments you may want to make with reference to what was said?
Of course, no worries. Well, I would like to say that I've lived partially some of the points that the panelists have mentioned. I have grown up with more or less strict parents. There are certain rules in my house that, for example, as long as I'm living under my family's house, there are certain rules that cannot be changed or questioned because it's the way things are done. So I would say that quite a high percentage of the youth today still faces certain things like that. So I see your point. And I actually think that to a certain extent that is positive, because you are trying to provide for your child as much as you can because you think that, well, you acquired this knowledge and you're just trying to help your kid. There's no manual, there's no guide that tells you how to parent, or at least one that always gives you positive results. So you guys are doing the best that you can, and we understand that. I think, for example, that there's a difference in there. Maybe 20 years ago, kids might have not understood it because they were questioning, oh, why can't I be myself? Why can't I say things? Why can't I speak? But now, because we're more conscious and aware of what's around us, I think that the youth understands that a little bit better, and we're actually thankful for it in an extent. So I see your point, and like I said, to a certain degree, I agree with that. You mentioned that we must have entrepreneurs, that there's 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds that are creating their own companies. That is true, and I think that is a really, really big advantage because it helps us be creative. It helps us keep us on our feet at all times, because now more than ever, we come up with various solutions to one same problem, and we work collaboratively. And if we have to ask for help, we're not afraid to ask for it. You said it. We're bold. We're courageous. Yes, that's because we're conscious. I would say that the biggest advantage is consciousness. The fact that it's like the youth has woken up. It has always been awake, but now more than ever, we take a stand on the things that we believe in, because we see that the world, that your generations are here, and we respect them, we celebrate them, we welcome them. But the world, the next 30 to 40 years, the change that's going to happen is on us. We have to take responsibility for that, and we have to see what we do and what direction we want the world to go towards. So it's our time for us to take control over that and try our best like you did. So I think that consciousness is our biggest advantage. We become entrepreneurs, we become activists, we become parents with positive parenting. We've changed the way things work because we care about the well-being of everybody, which is also something that has existed before, but I think that now we're focused on that much more than ever before. We strive for laws and protocols that establish certain ways of behaving with people, so we make sure that a person doesn't feel as though they've been attacked or ostracized or put to a corner because they don't fit in that box. We celebrate the differences. We celebrate diversity. And thanks to that, we all grow. Not just us, the youth, but all of you as well. Thanks to computers, thanks to new applications, thanks to Uber and all of these things that I'm pretty sure that all of you have used at least at some point. You're using Zoom right now. For example, you're using technology that the youth is managing, that we're constantly creating new things. You know, so I would say consciousness is our biggest advantage, but it could be used in a better way because not all youth is conscious. And the truth is that a lot of the youth that is conscious chooses not to take a stand, chooses not to take action because, oh, somebody else will fix it. It's somebody else's fight, it's somebody else's thing to deal with. No, it's not. We must all work together if we want to create effective change. It can't just be that one person deals with that and you don't, because we all live here. So consciousness comes with a price. So I think that would be our biggest advantage, but that still needs a little bit of fine-tuning. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you for that passionate answer too. We have a third question. Then, of course, you will be able to discuss what each other said as well, because we'll have some more time to debate. The third question says, what do you think young people could do today to face less challenges in their day-to-day? Saskia, what do you think people could do to be less challenged by this world?
Yes, I have to think about what James said, because it's so important, this consciousness. And well, in that sense, I think partly consciousness also starts with education. And well, I have to be honest that this is one of the things that worries me, because education somehow, and I don't know how you feel about it, but education in many parts of the world, it has become a political instrument, you know, an instrument of power to kind of program people in a certain direction, to a certain political agenda, which is very worrying, because then you are not really, you know, getting, you are not being given access to what you are entitled to. I think it's a fundamental human right to receive education, which is value-free somehow and not a political instrument. But also I think the education is a very old-fashioned system. You know, it's built on the premises of 200 years ago, Taylor, you know, and this, we still are working with that same system. So, so what youth, so how did you exactly phrase it? What do you think youth can do to face those challenges, right?
No, the question is, what do you think young people could do today to face less challenges?
Less challenges, exactly, yeah. I think and I think this is what they're already doing, to be honest. I think that we put very much, our generation put the emphasis on education and this degree. And since now this is kind of become a commodity, let's be honest. Everybody has an MBA. So I think what we have come to, what we see happening is that it's not only about your education, about your degrees, but about the totality. And this is why I love this humanology. It's about who you are as a human being. And you're not just a degree. I mean, it's the whole package. And it's this, I think, which youth understand so well. So I don't know. I don't think they have as primary motive as we have, oh, we have to get our titles, you know. I think and it could sound like, oh, what you want to be happy, this sounds trivial. It isn't. It's very fundamental, because it's somehow telling us we want the whole package. We will study, we will make a living, we will be responsible, but there's more to it. And I think, and they are doing that. They're acquiring all these skills to navigate in this complex world. And they're doing that in such a good way, in my view. And I think we should more often also tell them that. So what I think is that we too often, and this is part of the educational system, you know, we say, oh, that you failed. We always sanction behavior which we don't want to see. We should also applaud when you fail. And we should also applaud when you do good things. Because then you also start to see life. I compare it, I love that metaphor. It's the hero's journey of Joseph Campbell. And he describes our life as a journey through life. And he says, you come across dragons and obstacles and also the abyss even. But this is part of what life is about. And I think youth understand that. And they are, they want to become heroes in their life journey.
Thank you, Saskia. Thank you so much for that answer. Let's see. I think you were talking about education. The next speaker should be, or the next panelist should be Richard. Richard, what's your answer?
Thanks, Saskia. I actually put this question out to my family on the family chat. And that's been a great thing also, talking about the advantages of technology, as we have a family chat that we connect to my family in the US, and my daughter is actually studying at the University of Amsterdam, Saskia, so she's near you. And so we have, you know, and my wife is German, so we have the German family, so that really has been great. So I put it on the family chat, and I got some great answers, right? and I have, this nieces and nephews and things. He said, how to face less challenges. He said, go outside more, put down the phone, learn to fish, learn to sing, and try to learn something every day. Stop comparing their paths to others. Be more mindful, practice some yoga, and get a balance in life. And the last one, this was from my 85-year-old grandmother, who said, also, love your grandmother. She is very wise. So there's something about that, right? Listening to each other, caring, talking. And I really think the youth understand that. I worked with them so many places. They are incredible and very, very hopeful that they will be successful in making the world, better for everybody. From the kids in Panama who don't have clean water and food and education to those who have, a lot of stuff, a lot of material goods, but they don't maybe have a meaning in their life yet. And so they'll try to find that too.
The purpose of life. I love that topic. Thank you so much, Richard, and extended family for their contributions to the panel. Thank you so much. Alex, what's your take on this? What would you say?
Very quickly, I think that is a blanket challenge that's being faced by humanity. I think everybody needs to learn that, the world pandemic, there's more natural disasters, economic downturn. I think generally everybody has to learn to be more fluid and more, I don't know whether there's a specific way to describe it. You can use terms like growth mindset, but be very fluid that I think we are bombarded. I have a feeling that the natural disasters are happening more rapidly. I think it's our fault, humans. We are screwing with the weather, and we're dealing with the repercussions. So that's one. I have a view where in every generation, we would do our best to reduce challenges, but challenges must be accepted and embraced. I feel so. My fear for positive parenting, right? At first was, do you create strawberry generation? I give you an example, right? Last week, my intern, the parent accompanied her to come and visit the office. I will never ever get my parents to accompany me, for an interview ever, right? But the parent brought them. So I'm wondering, does that help them or not? I'm not too sure, right? Or maybe it's for convenience, maybe because they can. We used to take the bus, the public bus, and we had to change buses just to find, and we didn't have, GPS or map. It was even harder. And then back then we didn't get extra assistance. And yet the current world is much easier, and yet they still get assistance, right? Now, I'm not going to comment because every generation has different kind of advantages, right? The point is not to compare. I think what everybody can do is be very fluid and collect on each other's strength. I think that is the most important thing, that there's less competition. Like the older generation and the younger generation, we should not make this comparison that is different. Accept it is different, right? It's not that you have better or I had it better. I think the question is not that. It's much more about, okay, this is what you're facing right now. How are you using what you have right now to deal with it? I think that's very important. The youth shouldn't blame the older generation for screwing, climate change. The older generation shouldn't, blame the youth, for doing so much activism, and then, you clash. So when everybody becomes more collective and wanting to do it together, even when there's challenges, I think you'll make it much easier. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alex. James, your turn.
So I would like to pick what Saskia said about failures must be celebrated. I completely agree. Failure in reality is a lesson learned. And I think that's actually quite positive. I don't think failure should have a negative connotation, because failures help us grow just as much as our success. So I think that that's one of the things that young people need to focus on today to face less challenges. They have to be a little bit less hard on themselves, because it is true, we do compare ourselves to a lot, and partially because of social media. That is true. And we compare ourselves to everything and everyone, when many times, for example, we see an image that is photoshopped, but we want to strive to be that way. But a person cannot get to that body because it was modified digitally. We must accept ourselves and cherish what we are in this very moment, and not be as hard on ourselves. I would say that, well, being an optimism coach, I would say that another thing that the youth must do is, we've spoken about dealing with things, bearing with things. It is not the time to bear with things. It is not the time to be resilient. It is the time to be an optimist, because an optimist is also resilient. But an optimist keeps going in a positive way, with looking at each moment and assessing that situation there and then, and looking for a way to keep going and not give up. It's a person who finds something good in the situation, no matter what, because there always is. There's always two sides of the same thing that we're dealing with. Right now, we have 4 different perspectives, for example, of the same topic. So I would say that we must be optimists. It's not enough to be resilient. If a person's an optimist, the challenges no longer feels so much as a challenge, but as an opportunity. So that's something that we can do. And then following what Alex had said about being fluid, I completely agree that we must have adaptability. We must be just like chameleons. We must adapt to our surroundings and to what is happening. That doesn't mean that we lose ourselves with this change. It means that we learn how to be ourselves with the change. So I would say that that's very important, because things will always change constantly. And it is up to us to keep up in a way. So I think that's what the youth needs to do. They need to adapt to the situations. If they don't like something, they must look for solutions. They must be able to adapt and be resourceful in order to be able to face these challenges and little by little minimize them, and be optimists. So like that, those challenges are no longer challenges, but opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Well, we have our answers to the questions, but this is just the beginning. This is not the end. Let me invite all the panelists to join me on the screen. Hello, everyone, again. We're going to have a few questions from the audience. And of course, I invite all the panelists to comment on any of the previous topics that came up, because I know there's a lot of food for thought in everything that was said. I will nonetheless start by asking you the questions we already received, but this will now be an open conversation, which is the goal of this Human Conversations. So the first question that we got says, would you say that the world is a more dangerous place for young people today? Would you say the world is more dangerous? Right now, you just open your mics and answer, or raise your hand if you wish to. Just take the floor and answer. There's no preset order to the answering of this. So do you think the world is more dangerous for young people today? Saskia?
I think, and this is where generation does play a role. I think that we think it's a more dangerous place. And that this is one of the reasons I think that we maybe are a bit too overprotective, because of course we are aware of all the problems that there are in the world, and now on top of that corona. But to be honest, I don't know, I wouldn't know how youth perceive the world, and having children, teaching young people, I perceive the world as a dangerous place. So I think it's our perception, and not necessarily the perception of youth.
Anybody else would like to say something?
I would say that, like Alex mentioned before, we mustn't compare different generations. The world evolves, the world changes, like we've mentioned, and the dangers that we face today are different from the dangers that we faced in the past. Yes, some of them have remained the same, but there are other ones that haven't, and some of them have stopped being a danger, others. So there's been a change, so there's no way of comparing it. It is a matter of what Saskia said, it's a matter of how you perceive the world. In Humanology, we speak about the worldview and how each person has a very specific and personalized worldview based on their own personal experiences and beliefs. What I see might not be what you see, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit difficult to be able to answer such a question, because you, like I said, you mustn't compare it to the past. Yeah. So yes, the world can be dangerous, but the world can also be exciting, and the world can also be a marvelous place. It can also be a place that's filled with joy and beauty and just love. So it's a matter of where you look and what you decide to focus on.
Yeah.
But if you think that the world is a dangerous place, then change it. If it's really affecting you and you don't like what you're living in, try.
No, I wasn't speaking about myself. I was explaining that we are overprotective towards the younger generation. No,
no, I understand, Saskia.
We want to protect the children. Yeah.
Of course, I completely understand. And like I said, it wasn't directed directly towards.
No, but you're right. No, it's absolutely true what you say. I totally agree. Yeah. Yeah.
Anybody else?
And I think.
Yeah. Okay, Alex, and then Richard.
I'll make it a short one, Richard. Right? I think the world is a more paranoid place, and they're paranoid, and there is an increase in the perceived threat, not perceived danger, but perceived threat. For example, people perceive the internet is dangerous. For example, it is paranoia, whether it's true or not. There are perverts and pedophile on the internet. There is statistics, but people are paranoid that it will happen to my children, right? And there are more threats that we can't change. James, for example, right? I used to be able to go out and play until the evening. My mom don't have to worry about a lot of cars and traffic that will run me over. I will never let my daughter do that right now, that she can, go out and at 9 years old and play. She will get run over. I mean, the sheer amount of cars, and I can't change that. I don't think I can change traffic, right? So it is more of a perceived threat, right? We don't feel that our kid is danger, but neither would we allow her to do it. Right, it's just a perception, and everything can be dangerous. So I agree with James, right? That there is this perception that, hey, and I agree with Saskia, there is this protectionism that is happening by us as well. So I think there's increased paranoia, but not increased danger.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, Richard.
I would agree. I just want to say, I think there are new dangers that I've seen over my time as a young person and then as a parent. There are new dangers, but I think there are also ways we're protecting kids. cell phones can be dangerous, but it also is a great way to stay connected with your kids. You can follow your kids and know where they are. So I don't think it's a more dangerous place. I think there are new dangers, and we just have to, as parents and as teachers, get more in tune with what's going on and make sure we stay involved in what the young people are going through so we can help them and talk to them. So we don't just say, well, you just shouldn't do that because we didn't do it. That's the wrong approach. I think if you all said this in the panel, that communication has to stay open, and then we'll be fine.
Thank you. There's a question coming in from Sierra Leone. It says, does the socialization the young people are exposed to today prepare them for a sustainable future through today? So is this socialization that they're experiencing getting them ready? What would you guys say? Thank you for the question, by the way.
All right. All right.
Yes. Go for it, Richard.
One word answer, yes, absolutely.
Okay, anybody else?
Can you please read the question again?
Oh, sure. Does the socialization the young people are exposed to today prepare them for a sustainable future through today?
What exactly do they mean by socialization? Are they speaking about how we socialize with one another, or how society expects the youth to be within society and how it interacts with the world in general? What exactly are they talking about? I personally would ask them to specify a little bit in order to be able to answer that question, because depending on what field they're talking about, the answer would be different, I would say.
So the person who wrote the question, please, if you can clarify. For James, he will give you his answer when we get that clarification, if possible. In the meantime, is there anybody else who would like to say something, or would you rather wait for the clarification and I ask another question?
Yes, I'm thinking, because he comes from Sierra Leone, and I work a lot with many people from the African continent, and it could be that I can imagine that he means that it has to do with what you learn from your parents and the expectations your parents have about your life also, and is that in tune with what also not only the young people need, but also is that in tune with what's happening in the world? Are we preparing them for the world? And I think it's a very complicated question, to be honest, because this has to do with the motive. I think the motives of parents are always, they act out of a good heart, but it doesn't mean that we always do the correct thing. On the contrary, we probably often don't do the correct thing. But are they prepared for the world? Do we kind of make them strong and centered enough and say, whatever happens, you can confront it? I don't know, to be honest. In that sense, I think that's why also what your work is important, because you are confronted with these things as optimism, taking charge of your life. This is what you somehow have to learn also, not only in education, but in your socialization. And I can imagine that, we should do that more. So when you mentioned, James, that yes, that we should also allow young people to make mistakes. I think also what you said, young people should also be kind enough to themselves, that when they make a mistake, it's okay. This is what I often see, young people can be so strict to themselves. They say, wow, I'm not working hard enough, I'm not disciplined enough. I said, wait a moment, you're young. You don't have to be perfect. So, so in a sense, I think the expectations they have of themselves is also, and if that's influenced by parents, yeah, probably, but not only. I think they also are very strict on themselves.
Okay, there is a clarification coming from the person who posed the question. It says, the challenges they're facing now, pandemic, unemployment, poverty, deprivation, injustice, Okay? So there it is. Yes, James?
So now that I have a bit more information for the question, I'll go ahead and answer it. So you're saying how can the youth have a sustainable future in these circumstances? Well, the first thing I would say is here in the International Institute of Humanology, one of the main things that we say is that you are not your circumstances. The external factors around you, while they may affect you, don't define you. So I would say that that's the first thing. And I think that youth today needs to realize that that is the case. It is how you choose to handle the situation that will determine what direction you go to next. You're saying, okay, how can I have a sustainable future? We mentioned earlier adaptability. Our youth must be able to adapt. We must be like chameleons. We must be able to be in any surrounding and strive in that surrounding. We must be able to grow. It is our time now to be creative. You're saying, for example, okay, how do we create a sustainable future? Let's talk about, for example, horticulture. We can talk about how we can grow our new harvest, our food, our nutrition in a much more eco-friendly way that can also be relatively economic. There's hydroponic farms, for example, which is just water. You no longer need soil to grow your food. And that is thanks to the creativity of people who were thinking of ways of creating sustainable horticulture. Now, you look at some of the youth, and in fact, I'm going to mention a movie that I really like that's on Netflix. So if anybody wants to watch it, I recommend that you do. It's called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. That movie is about a little boy, and this is a true story, that lives in a farm and they don't have a lot of money. And he starts to think of ways of how he can help his family improve the farm and have enough food for the year. And that process of making mistakes, like Saskia mentioned, of adapting, of finding new resources, of having that entrepreneur mindset, as Richard mentioned, thanks to that and not giving up, being an optimist, that boy was able to find a solution to that and was able to help his family. And thanks to that, he has created that in many other regions, and that's helped thousands of families, thanks to that one boy who had a creative mind. So I would say that it is our time to be creative. We must look for alternatives. If we don't like our current circumstances, we must change it. Like I mentioned before, it is our time now. Our generation must take effective action in order to generate real results and real change. If you want sustainable living, learn about it, ask for help, contact people, create a community, try to work as a team, try and see how you can change things little by little. Even if it takes 20 years, it doesn't matter how long it takes. What matters is that you get there. Thank you.
Yes, Richard.
I just want to mention that's a great movie, James. That's one of my favorites, and it ties into what I was saying. I think what's happening now with our youth is preparing them for this challenges that they're facing, right? And that interconnectedness is what's going to help them solve those problems, where they now care about kids far across the globe, and when they become owners of businesses, as these kids will create their own businesses, they have to think about how their business practices impact someone in Africa or in Asia, or before they didn't so much. And I think that's what I think in a very positive way. What they're doing is preparing them to be able to interact virtually with people and think about people, care about them.
There's one more question. Yes, Saskia, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say we do have to be aware there are people living on $1 a day, you know, so there are still people are so deprived, so poor, and then it's kind of a luxury to think about, you know, you're just barely surviving. And I read today that it was in the Dutch newspaper. I think youth should have a head start always, and they were saying that the rich, the really rich, you know, that they should give every young person on the globe 10,000 euros as a start. Mm-hmm. And because it's also about money. And then you at least have some pocket money to start whatever you want to start. Because, you know, living from $1 a day, this is inhumane.
I think we're going to have to organize another human conversation around the idea of that general basic income for all human beings, which is a topic I love. But we will organize it in the future. There's one more question that I want to ask you that just came in. It says, we see that the younger generations are less interested in the traditional way of life. There's more and more of them talking about not willing to live until they grow old. Is this a sign of a dying society? How can this attitude be changed? So what this person seems to say is that there's more and more people saying, I don't want to grow old. Is this a sign of a dying society? How can this attitude be changed? Yes, James?
I would say, in all fairness, if a person doesn't want to grow old, that is completely up to the person. A person has a choice. We don't choose to be brought into this world. We don't choose to be born, to exist, but we can choose whether we cease to exist. That gives us power. That gives us a way out if we wanted it. It's very dark, what I'm saying, but it is a reality. And that is a reality that gives comfort to a lot of people because they think, if all else fails, and if I can't deal with anything anymore, I always have an alternative. I always have a way out if need be. And I can assure you that if a person were to choose to take their own lives at a younger age, they will have the reasoning for it. It is not a thing that you just wake up one day and, okay, I'm gonna do it. It's a premeditated thought that because it is a big decision to make. It is a hard decision to make because what you do affects the people around you as well. Like, for example, your family and your friends. So it is a hard decision. I would also say that while, yes, there's a lot of people that don't want to grow old, I think it's because when you grow old, depending on your circumstances, like we were mentioning now, like Saskia mentioned, there's a person that lives on $1 a day. What do you do if you're 60, 70 years old and you're still living on $1 a day? What happens if you've fought over and over again and you cannot change that reality because for some reason you have not managed to get out of those circumstances? Well, then that person might not want to live the next 30 years in that same circumstance. It depends partially as well, like we mentioned, beliefs, the way that we see the world, our worldview. If a person sees the world as dark and a place that is not worth being part of, why would the person fight to be part of something they don't want to be part of? You know, and we must respect that. I don't think it's a bad thing that some of our youth doesn't want to live until they're old because it is their own personal choice. I don't think that means that we are a dying generation. I think that means that we are a generation that decides, that we decide on our lives, which is power, it's freedom. rather than being restrained by what must be done or what is right. You must do this and you must live this life because it's the right way to do it. There's no right or wrong. So that's what I would say in regards to this.
Thank you, James. Any answers, any comments? Yes?
Go ahead, Saskia. Saskia, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, it's interesting because I interpreted it also different, the question. This is how I translated it, because the question was, so that they're expressing they don't want to live until they grow old. And I understood it the way that they have seen us, you know, wait till our 65th year. And then we say, oh, when we are 65, we will start to live and do the things we always wanted to do. So it's a matter also of how this is how I interpreted it. And this is what I can imagine, you know, that young people see, this is our generation, we have to work, and nowadays till 70 maybe. And then I think, you know, what kind of life is this? I mean, so this is how you could also understand it, that they think, and this could also be related in a sense, because this is what we are mirroring them. Yeah, you have to work till you're 67 now, maybe at your age till 75, because we won't have enough money for all these pensions. And then they think, what kind of life is this? You know, wait till I'm 70. I won't make it probably. So this is how I interpreted it. And I can understand. The youth want to live now. They want to enjoy now. They want to have experiences now. And while we said, well, we wait. And this is kind of, so this is how I understood it.
Thank you, Saskia. Yeah. Alex?
Firstly, I must apologize. I don't entirely understand the question per se, but I disagree with the last part. How should we change their attitude? Number one, you presuppose that your way or a certain way is better than their way. Who are you to say that they have to change? That's what I disagree, right? But I think if you talk about the when to grow old, I think it's also very delusional to assume you didn't have that. The search for the fountain of youth has been going on for centuries. Everybody don't want to grow old. What do you mean this generation don't want to grow old? I simply disagree with that. Movies are done based on, you know, searching for fountain of youth. In fact, the movies today no longer have that plot. That plot was very popular 20 years ago, you know, In Search of Fountain of Youth and what have you, right? But I would say this about the youth, right? I feel that the youth today is not as realistic, and they will go riding into the sunset as they wish. Whereas, you know, if I don't want to work and I want to pack my bag and eat, pray, love to Bali, they just pack up and go. Right, and that's the truth. I don't think anybody can deny the amount of backpackers. My friends are nomad entrepreneurs in Bali. The sheer amount of youth there, right, want to sip coconut and work and use the internet to be an entrepreneur. But what they don't tell you, how many % of that lifestyle fail? They never tell you, right? And then they become depressed, right? So they only show you the glamorous side. So that's the part where I disagree about the youth. I think the older generation has more sense of responsibility. There are things that we want to do, but because of a sense of responsibility, we don't do it as much. Whereas the youth today, I think it is my life. I am the master of my life. Therefore, who should tell me what I should do? Right? I think there's no hard and fast rule. I think there is a balance. I think they will get their responsibility after they hit some roadblocks and learn, you know, and, oh yeah, I learned what. And that's what they say, right? Oh, every mistake, like James actually said just now, it's such a cliche. There's no failure. Everything is learning, right? Or during my father's time, a failure is a failure. If you don't get an A, you don't get an A. You know, I can't wing it, right? I think it's a lot about, you know, the society fusing together and learning to learn this new way of life. There's no point wanting to change them or they change us, or I see this is how they behave. How can I leverage on people that think like James, right? And make myself flourish at the same time, right? As an entrepreneur, how can I tap into their lifestyle and thinking? If I want to change the world, I use what they like, which is internet, rather than asking them to change. I lead them to the water that they think they want, and everybody wins. So yeah.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, Richard.
Yeah, I agree with that, and all the points are super. I just want to add, I was thinking about the difference, and 40 years ago or so, you would think, when I was younger, I would think the world was going to end. Right? We got that message also, the world's going to end. It's going to be terrible from some Cold War missile or something. But I only got that message once a day at 11 o'clock or 7 o'clock if I watched the news. And the rest of the time, I didn't have it in my life. And today, the kids are being told the world is going to end through climate change or some other, virus, but they're getting it like 18 hours a day because it's coming right into their phones. They can't avoid it. They do a Google search and they're going to get something. And so it's bombarding our young people with how awful things could be. Also, as an optimist, James, there's a lot of stuff on how wonderful it can be, but we have to understand they're getting bombarded with messages that, growing old is not going to be good and the world is going to be a mess and stuff. So we don't have a great answer for that yet, but we have to understand it. And then as we teach the younger people, help them to find meaning in things, right? So they don't want to end their life, and there's a lot more kids committing suicide and having therapists and going to anxiety drugs more than ever. And we have to understand that and accept that and try to work with it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Richard. Okay, so there are no more questions now. There might be some later because people watch this later and they also write their questions. So I invite you all to connect to our social media, I will say it, and then answer if you see any questions that you feel are directed to you, or if you would rather answer those questions. I will give you the floor in a second, James. Thank you. So I will post this. This will remain on our Facebook page, and this will be shared through our YouTube channel. We will send you the link as soon as it's up and running, so you can also answer whatever questions people pose. And I will give you the floor now, each of you, a few minutes, like 2 minutes before we finish, so you can share your final messages because we only have a few minutes left. James.
I actually had a question for the other panelists that I was really eager to know their answers. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it either way.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to know how your mentality has changed, or whether it has changed from when you were my age to now, the present moment, in this very moment. If you had to look back and see how you were, what has changed? And would you say that when you were in my age range, did you see the world more like the youth sees it now, or has something changed? I want to know what the difference is, because we're all different age groups. So I think it would be an interesting activity.
Okay, thank you. We have a few minutes. Who wants to go first? Nobody wants to take that challenge. Yeah, Saskia, go ahead.
I think, and I have to be honest about this, I have liberated myself. I was raised in expectations, so I lived a life of expectations, and I feel free now. That's the big difference. And this is what I see in youth. They are asking us to give them the freedom. So yes, it leads to excesses that they go off to Bali or whatever. But I think this is so fundamental, because my life has been to liberating myself from all those expectations. And it has taken me a long time, too long.
Thank you, Saskia. Anybody else would like to answer?
All right.
Yes, Richard?
Yeah, I've changed a lot. And my world was very limited when I was, I mean, my early 20s, although I was teaching already, and I'd been to Europe on a visit, and I was actually long distance correspondence with my future wife, right? Where we had no email, we had a mail, you know, snail mail, and we'd talk once a week on the phone for maybe an hour. We did this for a couple of years. So, but my world was very limited, and my stereotypes were very set still in the Midwestern, you know, U.S. stereotype. And being, you know, over the years traveling and seeing more through the internet as well as human beings, I'm much more open, much more accepting, and that's been wonderful for everybody, right? And as a teacher, I'm better. As an administrator, as a parent, I'm better. And I think a lot of our parents are doing that too. They're opening up. As Jane was saying, we're not, you know, saying to kids, we have to do this. You have to think like that. We're saying, let's have a dialogue. So I'm more about that. I still want my kids to understand our values, family values, and they appreciate that. Kids like guidelines, but I'm much more open-minded about things.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, Alex?
Yeah, my quick answer is I think I have more optimism now because I believe we are more well-networked. I believe, like, even for today, you know, from all the way from Malaysia to Panama, our voices are being heard, or even for me, even now, right? Back then, it was not that I didn't believe. There was no real medium. Now it's not about a belief issue. You know, the medium is there. Is whether you do it or not. If in the past I say I want to influence 1 million's life, that's big. Now you can talk about I can influence 100 million life, and it's quite possible. And you have technology, and it's more scalable. So I think that's the word, right? Major difference for me would be the scalability. I have more optimism that the message that you want to bring or the change that you want to bring is more scalable than when I was in my 20s. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. So now, yes, the last message before we go. What is the last message you would like to give our audience today?
All right.
Go for it, Richard.
Okay. I mean, I've worked with people for almost 40 years, young people. They are able, this generation is so able to handle what's coming at them. And I think optimism is the big word. I am so optimistic more than ever in my life with what young people are able to do and the opportunities we're giving them. So that's my message. We have to treat them well, give them chances, still be their guides on the side, but be optimistic.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah.
Yes, Saskia.
We shouldn't clip their wings. We have to give them wings to fly really high.
Thank you, Saskia. James or Alex? Yes?
I have a message of a collaboration. I think it's very important not to have this mindset of comparison change. I think more dialogue like this, I think is amazing. And when you go into dialogue, having this open mind that it's not about you're right or I'm wrong or I'm right and you're wrong. It's about, hey, okay, what is a different perspective that we can give to one another, learn from one another, be humble, not to prove each other right or wrong, and co-create and co-construct. So I like that collaborative approach where we really go into dialogue and make change together, and not you make the change and then we sit back and, you know, critique about it. We make the change together. That's my message.
Thank you. James, last words, last message?
Yeah, it's kind of cliche, but treat others the way that you want to be treated. That goes a long way, trust me. And that goes for everyone, not just our youth. If we treat people with love, love will come back to us. So that would be my message.
Thank you so much, James. Well, thank you to the 4 fantastic panelists we had today. It was a pleasure and honor, and it was fun. As you know, we hold these human conversations both in Spanish and in English quite often, and we will invite everybody to continue contributing their own ideas and their own knowledge and wisdom so we can expand the conversations, as Alex just said. I cannot close this panel without mentioning something that came up several times throughout today's panel, which is optimism. To my knowledge, we are the only institution in the whole world specializing on optimism coaching. We teach people how to regain their optimism. We have a method that helps people do precisely that. And that is the first part or the first method or technique that we use in Humanology. When we have a client coming to us and they don't have the energy, the drive, the motivation to change, and that happens, there's no way a professional can work with that person. The first thing is to help them regain their optimism and motivation. And that is what that method does. So if you know of anybody who's lost their optimism, somebody who needs to regain it, or somebody who wants to learn how to help other people get their optimism back, get back to us. Get in contact with the Institute. Remember, iih.world, that's our website, and we will help you learn, and we will help you learn how to teach others as well. Thank you so much again. It has been wonderful. I really enjoyed this panel. Human Conversations is a creation by the International Institute of Humanology, working with and for human beings. Have a lovely day. Let's keep connected. Let's keep on spreading, and let's keep on sharing. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.